All right. Um, you guys probably saw the email from the president about relaxing the mask mandate on campus. It's a little confusing, so I just want to talk about it for a minute. Um, Masks are no longer required among individuals who are vaccinated when walking through the buildings, et cetera, et cetera. Masks are required indoors for unvaccinated individuals. Under all these conditions, we have the autonomy to do whatever we want as faculty. The tricky thing about it is that I'm prohibited by law from asking you what your vaccination status is. So I have no idea who's vaccinated and who is not. So until we reach a state, either on campus or in Missouri culture, Missouri, Kansas culture as a whole, where things are able to be more relaxed, I'm going to continue to ask you to mask in class, simply precautionary. I talked to my students about this last spring. When I do the math of, the inconvenience and discomfort of wearing a mask versus the inconvenience and really something I would have trouble living with of somebody coming to my class not wearing a mask, getting sick, and possibly dying, the calculus is pretty easy on my front. I would rather err on the side of caution than loosen things up earlier, because all of the language of the mask policy from the president is all predicated on you can do this in groups of unvaccinated or in groups of vaccinated people. Because I don't have any knowledge about anyone's vaccination status, once again, I'm just going to err on the side of caution until things are even safer than they are right now. I'm glad that we have the vaccination rates, which are quite high, that we have on campus. But once again, that 15% of people who are unvaccinated, I have no idea where they are, who they are, et cetera. So that's the policy for now until we get more information. If we get more information, there'd be nothing I would be happier to do mid-semester than shed the masks in this class. They fog up my glasses. Air blowing back in my eyes tickles my eyelashes, and I hate that. So a lot of times you'll see me doing this in class, and it's just because my eyelashes are tickling. And so it's just what we have to do for now. Questions about that? All right, cool. I'm very happy. You guys have been very, very willing to be masked, and I'm thrilled about that. So we haven't talked about the syllabus. Normally people talk about the syllabus. How many of y'all had syllabus conversations in your classes on the first day? God, what a boring way to start off the semester. But we have to talk about syllabus at some point, so we'll talk about it today. It's on the Moodle site. Should be a PDF there. There's also a syllabus section under the student tab on Joule Central where you can get access to all your syllabi. So this is a critical thought and inquiry, science, technology, and the human experience class. And in these classes, they attempt to answer, three big questions. How should we live, which kind of is in the realm of ethics? What can we know, which is in a formal area of academia called epistemology? And what is real? As a scientist, I'm much better at how can we know things and what is real than I am with how we should behave, because I'm not a philosopher, I'm not an ethicist. And so we will talk some about all of these things, but just know that in this class, we will talk somewhat less about this one and more so about these two things. What can we know and how can we know it, and then what is actually real? What's real in this course is that we have a food system that is dominated by the production of large commodity crops like corn and soybeans. Those crops have been altered by food scientists and converted into everything from corn on the cob, which is relatively unaltered, to a Milky Way bar, which is all manner of amalgam of corn in different forms. So that's kind of the reality of the food system that we currently operate under here in the United States in the year 2021. That's a very different system than existed even 50 years ago in the United States, and is way different than the system that existed 150 years ago. So part of this class is going to be the exploration of those changes in where we get our food, how we grow our food, what the food mixture is that is available to us and things like this, and how that has changed over the last 150 years or so. And all of that is just, there's no ethics in that, there's no anything in that other than this is just kind of the way it is. This is just kind of how it has happened, how it has changed. A big part of that relates back to the biology of the organisms that we grow for food. And a lot of that has to do with historical events that had a bunch of unplanned consequences that nobody thought about before we started going down this path. And once again, all of those things are really just things that you can know, not things that you need to make any ethical determinations about. There's a description of the course. There are a set of learning outcomes that you should certainly read. I think they'll be very much in keeping with kind of how I've been talking about the class so far, and hopefully they will be in keeping with how we talk about the class for the rest of the semester. I found it useful a bunch of years ago to put expectations in my syllabus for how I expect you to behave and interact. And so one year I just wrote them down and said, I'm going to put these in my syllabus. So I expect you to be here whenever you're not away on some co-curricular activity, football, track, whatever, debate team, whatever it is that you do outside of your normal academics. Be here alert, prepared. You guys all read the introductory chapter of the Omnivore's Dilemma in preparation for today? Good. Because we're going to talk about that as soon as we're done with this drudgery. There's not a lot of homework in this assignment beyond reading. There's occasionally some homework that I will give you to help you practice some of the things that we've done in class. The genetics homework is one of those things where the only way to really learn a little bit about genetics is to actually work through some problems thinking about genetics, and so there's going to be some homework, but this is not a super homework heavy class. It's a heavy reading class to a certain degree, and it's heavy in writing to a certain degree, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Do your best. Also, don't be afraid to speak because you think you're going to say something that is wrong. I've been going through this with my first year students in biology and asking them a ton of questions in the first couple of days so that I get a ton of answers from them. Half of them are not really very good or not very correct, et cetera, and then we just blow past the incorrect answers until we can get to some correct answers so that we can kind of move on with the material. There's no consequence for being wrong in any of my classes, except on an exam, and then there's consequences there. But in the learning environment, it's okay to be wrong. We'll call attention to it. We'll try and get at the right answer after that. But the fact that you were wrong doesn't affect the fact that you can't be right next time, and it really doesn't have any impact other than in that moment, there's a little bit of incorrect information flowing around the room, and we need to get to the correct information and get rid of the incorrect information. So give me your best, but don't be afraid of being wrong. Everybody's wrong occasionally. Show respect to your other people. Do your best to think and think well and think integratively and synthetically and try and put pieces together so that you're not just memorizing a bunch of facts, you're putting those facts together into bodies of knowledge that are bigger and mean more than the individual facts themselves. By all means, ask me questions. There's nothing I hate more than droning on for an hour and 5 minutes with nobody asking any questions. Realize that I'm human just like you. I'm not infallible, and we'll get along fine. That might seem like a lot to expect, but you can expect similar things from me. I am going to be here prepared every day. I don't know if I told you, I'm in the process of building a camper trailer from scratch. Did I tell you this? Oh, one of the things I do is I do woodworking, and me and my wife got this crazy idea that we would build a teardrop trailer from scratch. We bought a trailer bed with wheels on it, but everything else we're building from scratch. And we were out at her parents' farm over the weekend working on it in their barn because it has enough space. And I told her yesterday I need to get home early enough tonight to sit down and reread the Omnivore's Dilemma introduction so that I could be prepared this morning. I've been teaching this class every semester since 2007, every fall since 2007. I do not need to read the introduction of the Omnivore's Dilemma again. But I got home last night, I ate dinner, I sat down in my armchair, and I read the Omnivore's Dilemma introduction again. Why? Because I want to be as prepared on today's morning for this discussion as I can possibly be. I woke up this morning at about 6. While I was eating breakfast, I had the Omnivore's Dilemma introduction sitting in front of me, just reminding myself of things that I wanted to be sure that I didn't miss in class today. So I'm going to be as prepared as I can. I want you to come as prepared as you can be for the day's activities. Ultimately, I have to grade you. Once again, my grading of you has nothing to say about you. It has to say everything about that product that is in front of me. Everybody has a bad day. My first semester of organic chemistry, when I was an undergraduate, I made an A. My second semester of organic chemistry, I made a D. I just barely squeaked through and passed. All kinds of reasons as to why that was the case, but that D didn't represent who I was as a human being. That D represented a pretty rough semester that I didn't perform as well as I wanted to. It happens. The amazing thing is, when I went to apply to graduate school, nobody gave a damn about that D in organic chemistry. They didn't even look at it. Nobody asked me about it. I got a PhD. Nobody mentioned that D in organic chemistry. I want to show you respect that you deserve. I'm occasionally going to challenge and probe your thinking, probe the things that you say in class to try and, in some cases, help me understand better what you're trying to get at. In some cases, to reveal why maybe that thing that you said was perhaps not the best way of thinking about something. You're human, you're not infallible. I get that. I also have to balance that, though, with the necessity of grading your performance. So that's sometimes a difficult balance. Evaluating your course performance in an academic sense, once again, this is always independent of my evaluation of you as human beings. I'm available. My office hours are on the syllabus. Because we're still living in this weird kind of COVID land, I'm trying to avoid time on campus to a certain degree still, although I'm spending more time on campus than I was back in the spring. So if you're going to want to come and see me outside of office hours, it's useful if you just drop me an email to say, hey, I see you don't have office hours during this time. Do you have time then to meet with me about whatever it is you want to talk about? And then I'll make a point of being in my office during those times. The other thing is I teach a biology class that has a heavy field component. And so a lot of times when I'm outside of office hours, I'm actually in the field doing field work with students studying ecology. And so I'm not always in my office as much during off times during the fall anyway. So if you're coming by outside of office hours, it's always best just to let me know you're coming and what time, so I'll be sure and be there. You guys are independent adults. You guys are all sophomores, juniors, and seniors. I'm going to treat you to a certain degree like you've figured out how college works and are evolving into the adults that you are becoming, and so I'll treat you like equal adults. I might have mentioned on the first day you can either call me Dr. Klawinski or Paul. This is something I do with my biology students. I think of them as junior colleagues in the field, and the colleagues that I have on campus here, I don't call them Dr. So-and-so. So I view you as junior colleagues in the field as well, so I'm going to call you by your first name. You might as well call me by my first name. If that's uncomfortable for you, call me Dr. Klawinski. I will answer that equally well. But that's kind of my philosophical leanings on that. Attendance, be here. There's a long attendance policy that I've just copied the college's attendance policy and plunked it in here. I tend to not want to give makeup exams if there are extenuating circumstances that you can't be here for an exam. Come to me, we'll talk about it, we'll make some arrangement. I would rather you take the exam a little early when there's only one of you out there who has seen the exam than to take it after the fact when there are 20 of you who have seen the exam. COVID-19 statement, I've already kind of talked about keeping faces covered for the duration until something changes. If you have learning accommodations, you need to get those documented with Missy Henry. She will send me a letter, and then I will schedule a meeting with you just to kind of discuss how those play out in this class. We have an honor code. I generally don't get many honor code violations in this class because you guys are more advanced students typically. The one kind of honor code violation that I typically get in here is occasional instances of plagiarism. I don't normally talk about plagiarism in this class, but I probably will this semester simply because we had more plagiarism last year than is typical for this class. So I just want to review those rules with you as we get close to our first writing assignment later in the semester. But once again, this is just also the school's boilerplate information about the honor code. Once again, there's a college policy about sexual harassment. If I see anybody behaving weirdly in my classes, I generally call that out in the moment. It's proven to be a highly effective way of dealing with people. The 2 times that I've had to do it in the past, one time there was a guy who was clearly hitting on a woman in the back of the class, and she was getting more and more uncomfortable with the fact that the guy wouldn't go away. And I finally just said, I forget what the guy's name is even, Caleb I think was his name. I finally said from the front of the class in a very loud voice, "Caleb, she's not interested, move on." And that pretty much caused him to go as far away from her as he could be for the remainder of the semester. If you feel that you have been sexually harassed, there's contact information for the person who is in charge of sexual harassment claims. Also, if you come to me and talk to me about something like this, I'm what's known in the business as a mandatory reporter. You can't come to me and say, I want to talk to you about this, but you can't tell anybody. I am required by law, if you tell me something that should be reported, I am required by law to report it. So just be aware of that as you navigate this weird world we live in. Emails. Feel free to email me, but keep in mind that after about 5:30 on most weeknights, I'm not hanging out on email waiting to get an email from somebody. Also, Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, I typically have a scheduled bike ride that I do with some friends of mine. I bike ride for sanity and to stay in shape. And those are scheduled at 6, and if I'm not home by 5, changing clothes and getting my bike ready and everything else, I won't make the 6 o'clock appointment. And if I'm not there at 6, they're going to leave without me. So generally don't expect me to be here after 5 on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday because I have prior commitments. That said, the rest of you should also find ways of keeping yourself sane while being students at William Jewell College. For me, it's bicycling and building a camper trailer on the weekends. For you, it's going to be something different. But find ways to kind of maintain your mental health during all of this. I got some emails over the weekend. When I came in this morning at 7, I opened up my email. I saw a series of emails. I generally responded to those emails this morning when I got here. I did not respond to them yesterday because I just wasn't on email over the weekend. So then there's course requirements. Talked to you last time about getting a food journal, little booklet where you record everything that you eat and drink throughout the day. Robert, you weren't here for that, but you need to just get yourself a little spiral notebook. Preferably something that either fits in the back of your pocket or fits in your purse or fits in your backpack. It doesn't need to be an 8.5 by 11 spiral. It needs to be something small and portable so that you have it with you all the time. You'll turn these in every 2 weeks, so you should have started journaling, food journaling over the weekend, and then you'll turn those in not this coming Friday, but the next Friday after that, the first Friday of September. And then there are going to be, like I said, I'm setting up a food blog, a blogging program in the program WordPress. I'll send you out an invite when I have that set up. Every week, every 2 week period, there are going to be a series of prompts that you need to respond to. And the details for that is that you need to post 2 times a week and you need to respond to other people's posts 2 times a week. The problem with this in the past has been people think, oh, it's a 2-week period. I can just whip out 4 posts on Thursday night and I've satisfied the requirement. But the bad thing about that is that it doesn't give anybody the chance to respond to your comments. And so I would space these out and say, okay, I'm going to respond to posts on Monday of the first week, on Thursday of the first week, on Monday of the first week, and Wednesday of the second week, or something like that, so that you space them out, because you're required to write 2 posts of your own, but you're also required to respond to the posts of 2 other people. And if nobody else is posting until Thursday before the due date of the 2-week period, there's nothing out there for anybody to respond to. So try and space it out. Then there's going to be a position paper on genetically modified organisms in the food supply, and then another position paper at the end about food deserts in Kansas City. And so you can see everything in here. We're going to have exams. Genetically modified organism paper is 100 points. Food journals are 70 points, so you get 10 points for each food journal. You get 20 points for each food blogging exercise. There's a pretest that I'll send out a link to that here probably tomorrow. I'll get around to it. Then there's the Food Desert Project, which is 50 points, and then there's a self-evaluation at the end. So it's 820 points. Your grade is determined by how many of those points you accrue over time. And the percentages are here. Any questions about any of that? How do I what? Oh, in the Moodle site? Yeah, type in Moodle, search for CTI 259, and then it will allow you to self-enroll. And when you self-enroll, the enrollment key is POLLAN, which is the author of the Omnivore's Dilemma's last name. What's that? Let's see. Oh man, I can hardly see that. Yeah, there you go. So type in CTI 259. See if that does it. Return. Huh. Can I borrow this? Yeah. Wait. The rest of you find it online? That's weird. Does anybody know the site address for the Moodle here at Jewel? I opened up the app on your thing. Can I look?
It's just moodle.jewel.edu.
Is it just moodle.jewel.edu? All right, type in your username and password. Did it log you in? All right, now let's see if this works any better. There you go. Sure. Yeah. So access it from the app. I think you'll have a better experience on your iPad. All right. Other questions? In the on the Moodle site also, you will see that there is a daily schedule. So as you go through here, I've done a pretty good job of basically outlining what we'll be covering each day. We may get off somewhat, and if we do get off somewhat, we'll just rejigger the schedule and I'll post an update. But you can see that we're going to talk a lot about science here at the beginning, all the way up until the first part of October. Then we're going to switch to history, and there are going to be some presentations that you will make. Oh, this isn't in the graded assignments because I added this last year, and I forgot to update this on the grading sheet. So I'll alter the syllabus and update that as well. I'm going to break you into groups, and you'll make a group presentation. The genetically modified organism paper that you're going to write is going to be based on a report that came out in 2015 by the National Academy of Sciences on the science related to genetically modified organisms in our food supply. That's a dense, not written for the layperson kind of document. It's a whole book, actually. We're going to concentrate on 3 chapters of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign each chapter to a different group. You should all read the entire 3 chapters, but to kind of get you up to speed on those chapters, I'm going to have the different groups present their chapter to the rest of the class as a quick and easy way of kind of getting everybody up to speed. And I started this last fall when I taught it, and I had to add it to the grading list of graded assignments, and then I didn't do that in the syllabus, and so I should add that to the syllabus this time as well. And then once you're up to speed on that, then you can read those chapters more thoroughly, and you're going to end up writing a paper about that. So we're going to talk about history and economics, and we're going to talk about kind of food deserts at the end, and that's kind of the semester. So that schedule is up there, and I'll be making additions to that. So check back on Moodle as that thing changes and more stuff gets filled in on kind of what we're doing. It'll have like schedule updated, and it'll have the date that it was updated so that you can keep track of where we're going. So if you are out of town for a sporting event or something like that, you should just be able to look at that schedule, know what we were covering on Wednesday, and if you're gone on a Friday, okay, here's where we are in the schedule, so this is the next thing that is coming up. All right. Questions about that? All right. So, somebody want to share the last meal they had? Hopefully it was breakfast this morning. Yeah.
I had 2 breakfast burritos and a coffee.
Breakfast burritos at the calf or someplace else?
No, but they're like freezer ones.
Oh, freezer ones. Okay. Yeah. Oh, what was in the breakfast burrito?
Scrambled eggs, cheese, potatoes, and sausage.
Potatoes and sausage. Okay. So, Poland begins his book. Did you have to think about that breakfast burrito, or was it just in the freezer and you grabbed it? It's just in the freezer. You didn't have to think about it at all. This question, the first question in the book, what should we have for dinner? I was just having this conversation last night with my wife. On the way home, we already had dinner planned for last night, but we didn't have any dinner planned for tonight. I'm like, what do you want for dinner tomorrow night? And this is a ritual with us. I don't know. What do you feel like? Well, I don't know. That's why I was asking you. We decided to make capellini pomodoro. You guys know what capellini pomodoro is? Oh, man. It's the perfect time of year for capellini pomodoro. We have a bunch of raised beds at our place. We live in the historic district down here on Kansas Street. We have raised beds in the backyard. We got raised beds in the front yard. We got tomatoes coming out of the ears. Cherry tomatoes. Amish paste for making sauces. We tried these things called San Marzano tomatoes that are good in Italian cooking. They didn't respond very well to the climate here this year, so they've done less well. We have all these cherry tomatoes. So Capellini Pomodoro is just taking a bunch of cherry tomatoes, a little olive oil, some seasonings, whatever you like, putting them in a pan, cooking them until they burst, throw it all in a blender, cook up some pasta, mix the pasta with the sauce, some basil and things like that, some nice, good quality cheese. If you like Parmesan, that's good. And then it's just a really simple, quick, but really fresh for this time of year kind of dish because you have a lot of tomatoes around. So we decided to make capellini pomodoro. It was an easy decision because we have literally quart bags and gallon bags of cherry tomatoes sitting in our fridge, and we want to eat them before they go bad because our tomato plants are doing so well this year. But a lot of times you don't have to think about this very much because we live in a culture and in a society where there's tons of things to eat. So in this chapter, he then goes on to talk about this food crisis that occurred in America in 2002. What's he talking about? How old were you guys in 2002? Two? Yeah. You don't remember this because you didn't live through it, but what's he talking about here at the very beginning of this chapter? Yeah.
He's talking about
Kendrick, right?
Kennedy.
What?
Kennedy.
Kennedy. All right, sorry. Go ahead.
He's talking about like eating less carbs. I believe. During that time, like eating more red meat.
Yes, the rise of the Atkins diet. So in the 70s, Americans were getting fatter and fatter, and basically the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is responsible for making dietary recommendations, essentially told the American public, you're getting fat because you're eating too much red meat, you're eating too much fat. That stuff is high calorie, it's bad for you, it clogs your veins. You need to get off of fat. So people started taking in more carbs. And then in the late 90s, a bunch of studies came back and said, oh, carbs are really bad for you. So you need to cut out carbs. And so when we cut out carbs, we went back to eating red meat and fat. And do you guys know what the nickname for bread is? Jonathan Swift coined this phrase. You probably don't remember this. There was an ad for Wonder Bread back in the 1970s, because you guys weren't alive in the 1970s. It is the staff of life. And the Wonder Bread commercial was something along the lines of, Wonder Bread, because bread is the staff of life. The staff of life was demonized in the early 2000s because carbs make you fat. So he talks about this weirdness of basically moving from what he refers to as lipophobia, fear of fat, to carbophobia. And he claims that this was relatively overnight, and I don't remember it being relatively overnight, but I definitely remember this shift. The shift away from carbs and towards anything non-carb. We tend to follow diet fads in this country. How many of you have ever followed a diet? Oh, really? What kind of diet you guys follow? You guys are young. You shouldn't be dieting. Well, share if you feel comfortable. Yeah. Oh, okay. So you have a health-related dietary restriction that prevents you from eating certain things. So a common thing that's I should have thought about this. A common thing for young people who have been on a particular restricted diet would be something like food intolerances. Anybody without food intolerances who was on a diet? Yeah. Oh, you're vegan. So you're vegan by choice, not being imposed upon you by your parents or anything. Oh, they're against it? Oh, why is that? It is. Oh yeah. So in Brazil, so you're going to find it is more expensive here. How long have you been in the United States? A week now. You're going to find that it is more expensive here because fruits and vegetables are more expensive here than buying processed food. And we'll talk about this when we get to the economics portion of the class, but it's because of the way in which the federal government subsidizes agriculture. They don't tend to subsidize things like fresh fruits and vegetables, while they do subsidize things like rice and wheat and corn and soybeans. So those types of products are much cheaper than fruits and vegetables. And so anything that you buy that is derived from wheat and rice and corn and soybeans tends to be cheap, whereas fruits and vegetables tend to be more expensive. If you've never gone to the grocery store and priced food, you will find that this is the case. Fresh fruits and vegetables are generally the most expensive part of the grocery store. So yeah, sorry, this is not Brazil in that way. Um, Weird that your parents would say that, knowing that meat is more expensive in Brazil. Um, can I ask you, and you can refuse to answer, by the way. I'm just curious. Why did you go vegan? Like, what's your underlying reason for going vegan? Okay. Uh huh. Yeah. What are other reasons why somebody might be vegan or vegetarian? There's ecological justifications for it.
I think ethically it's wrong to eat animals, or like it's wrong to eat animals.
So we have ethical veganism related to, for example, animal rights activism. We shouldn't be eating anything that suffers in the process of being prepared for food. Um, Poland actually talks about this in a chapter called The Ethics of Eating Meat. What else might you be, vegan or vegetarian? There are health reasons for doing this. If you really want to lose weight and be healthier, eat a diet of nothing but fresh vegetables and fruits. Forget carbs versus protein and fat, et cetera, et cetera. Eat fruits and vegetables and nuts, and you will feel healthy, and you will drop weight, unless you're eating a ton of those, and you'll just be generally healthier because it's closer to the kind of diet that we evolved into than the diet that is available to us now. And we'll talk about evolutionary shifts in diet later on. What are the other reasons why you might be vegan? This is the most obvious and probably also the most common, but not so obvious that you're figuring it out. Yeah.
I know for some people it's like a morality issue of how important it is to
Okay. So this is what I mean by ethical. Yeah. People have ethical objections to eating other animals. Yeah. It could be cultural or religious. If you're Buddhist, for example, you are more than likely uh, vegetarian at the least, vegan possibly as well. Um, Another reason. I don't have any data on this, so I can't show you any proof, but I'll bet the reason I'm thinking of is probably the most common reason. People chasing the fad, looking cool. Oh, I'm vegan. So vegan. I'm so pure. Whatever it is that goes through people's mind, I don't understand it. I ask people when I find out if they're vegetarian and vegan, what their reason is, because I'm kind of interested in what the rationale is. I know a guy who teaches at UNLV. He was a pescatarian for a while. The only meat that he would eat was fish. Everything else was vegetable. And then finally he gave up fish because he did some research into what was happening to marine fisheries, and he's just like, I can't even do that anymore. He's very much a ecological, environmental vegetarian. Um, and there are good reasons for that. I eat meat. I don't eat nearly as much meat as I used to. I tried to go vegetarian a number of years ago as part of this class. I made a pact with my class that I would go vegetarian for a semester. I just found it really difficult to cook and eat, and some protein substitutes just they just didn't taste right to me in terms of kind of what I was trying to accomplish with my cooking. And so, but what that experiment did for me with this class that I did that semester was it it didn't get rid of meat altogether, but it significantly reduced it, and I'm probably healthier as a result of it. Um, Most of us probably don't think about what we eat the way somebody who's vegetarian or vegan has to think about what they eat. Friends of mine who are vegetarians are inevitably the best cooks because you have to develop your cooking skills in order to take nothing but vegetables and have it satisfy you from a taste perspective. Simply because you don't have all those fats and salts and stuff that come with eating meat that would normally be flavoring your food, and so you have to think about flavor more. Um, but once again, we went through this dietary shift, and why does Poland think that we tend to shift from one fad thing to another fad thing, one way of eating in America to another way of eating in America? And we approach eating in these fits and starts. Why does he think that we have this problem of not knowing what to eat and being blown about by the winds of change, dietary change, nutritional change? Yeah.
Because we don't do our own research about how to eat.
What's that?
We don't do our own research about how to eat.
That's actually not what he says in the book. That might be true, but that's not the reason that he gave. What did he think America has a problem with? So part of it is too much food. So we have, he says, a great abundance of food. And this great abundance of food, rather than making our lives easier, makes our lives harder. Why? This goes back to the title of the book as a whole. Yeah.
Because when you can digest a lot of things, and a lot of choices you have, a lot of things you can digest,
This is basically the omnivore's dilemma summed up. If you can eat anything, how do you decide what you should eat? And he goes on about this in some detail a little later in the chapter, where he talks about this work by Peter Rosen, studying rats. And rats are omnivores, and we're omnivores. We have an omnivorous dentition, our teeth. We have teeth for tearing things in the front and for grinding things in the back. We have teeth that are the teeth of an omnivore. We have a gut that is an omnivorous gut. It's longer than a carnivore's, but it's shorter than a strict herbivore's gut. And so the question of what should you eat is more difficult because you have the capacity to eat so many different things. And then when you take an omnivore and put them in a supermarket, there is so much to choose from. Oh, do I eat this cauliflower or do I eat the caramel M&Ms? I have facial expressions, actually. You just can't see them. Do I eat the SpaghettiOs? Or do I go and get some carrots? Do I stock up on broccoli? Key lime pie from the freezer section? Soda versus orange juice or milk or something else? All these decisions, because we can eat any of these things. So the question is, what do we eat? How much of it do we eat? And are those choices that we're making, are they the right choices? This is the omnivore's dilemma. Mentions a koala bear. What do koala bears eat? They eat eucalyptus. They're a dietary specialist. So we can think of organisms out in nature as specialists versus generalists. Generalists are omnivores. Omnivore, omni, anything. Koala bear sees a leaf, sniffs it. How does it decide whether to eat it? Does it smell like eucalyptus or not? Smells like eucalyptus, eat it. Doesn't smell like eucalyptus, don't eat it. Very simple decision-making tree for a koala bear. Do you guys sniff your food before you eat it? You guys have clearly never had a roommate in an apartment. Roommate goes to the refrigerator, pulls out the gallon of milk, opens it up, sniffs it. Here, I think this is bad. Smell it. Like, you just smelled it. You know it's bad. Dump it in the sink. We get all kinds of clues about the food that we eat. Smelling if something is rancid. Tasting if something sweet versus bitter. What are some bitter foods that you're familiar with? Coffee is bitter. I cannot drink coffee. It upsets my stomach. I also find it to be bitter in many cases. People get rid of the bitterness by doing what? Adding cream and sugar to it, because it has this bitter flavor to it. You guys know what cyanide smells like? Yeah, because you're probably not out there sniffing cyanide, are you? Cyanide smells like almonds. I study animal behavior, among other things, in my life as a biologist. I was in Peru back in 1996, and in Peru there are these armored millipedes in the family Polydesmidae. You don't need to know polydesmids, but they're millipedes, and they have kind of these there's a head, and then each of the body segments has kind of these wings that come off that are extensions of the body. But anyway, they have a very distinctive look to them. They're just repeated all down. They're millipedes, so they don't have fangs like a centipede does. But I picked up this millipede, and they're big, and they were running around the rainforest in the middle of the day. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. These big black centipedes running around the rainforest in the middle of the day. I picked one up, and guess what I did with it immediately? I smelled it, because I know that some millipedes are toxic and they produce cyanide. And as soon as I got it close to my face, I could smell the almond smell coming off of this millipede. And I picked up a stick and I poked it. And out of the joints of the legs came this stream of liquid squirting out of the legs. And at that point, I got this huge whiff of almond smell. So they have these glands in their body that have ducts at the joints of the legs, and when they're attacked, they squeeze the gland, and it squirts out this stream of basically fluid that contains cyanide. It's an anti-predator mechanism. I put that down, I washed my hands, then I got out a collection vial, I put it in a collection vial, put some ethanol in there, and then brought it back. So I didn't know what species it was, I didn't know if it was an undescribed species, and I was a biologist in a rainforest doing work there to do precisely that. So, smelling things. I don't eat almonds because it just kind of wigs me out. Because I've been in contact with organisms out in nature that if they smell like almonds, you shouldn't want to have anything to do with them. Not to mention, if you want to kill somebody with cyanide, just mix it in with their almonds. They'll never know it's coming. I'm a little paranoid. So you have ways of assessing the food that you eat. Visual cues, scent cues, taste cues. Don't ever stick a wild animal in your mouth until you've smelled it. In some cases, don't stick a wild animal in your mouth after you've smelled it, because there may be things in there that you can't smell that are still bad for you. But a specialist doesn't have to worry about that. If it looks like eucalyptus, if it smells like eucalyptus, and you're a koala bear, eat it. If it doesn't smell like eucalyptus and look like eucalyptus, don't eat it. In the book, when Poland is talking about rats, he talks about them having to make these decisions on their own. It's over on page 4. The rat must make this all-important distinction more or less on its own, each individual figuring out for itself and then remembering which things will nourish and which will poison. The human omnivore has, in addition to his senses and memory, the incalculable advantage of culture, which stores the experience and accumulated wisdom of countless human tasters before us. I don't need to experiment with the mushroom now called rather helpfully the death cap, and it is common knowledge that the first intrepid lobster eater was on to something very good. Our culture codifies the rules of wise eating in an elaborate structure of taboos, rituals, recipes, manners, and culinary traditions that keep us from having to reenact the omnivore's dilemma at every meal. This isn't actually true, the part about the rats. And this is one thing that I want you to remember about this book. Michael Pollan is not a scientist. Michael Pollan is not a biologist. He is not an ecologist. He is not an animal behaviorist. He's a journalism professor at UC Berkeley. He writes a lot about science, but you're going to find occasionally that you need to read what he writes carefully, because rats are not alone in their food decisions. There's an idea in animal behavior called the information center hypothesis. And what this basically says is rats are social creatures. They generally live in colonies. Wild rats, not your rat that's your pet. Any of you ever have a pet rat? Some people do. They're highly intelligent. But they live in a colony. And when rats go out foraging, they'll go out somewhere, they'll grab some food, they'll come back. And when they get back, the other rats will go up to that rat that's just returned to the colony and they'll sniff it. It's been observed. There's multiple papers written about this. They'll sniff it. And if they recognize the scent and it's good food, they'll actually leave the colony and go out on the path that rat just came back from. They will also sniff it, and if it's an unfamiliar scent, guess what they won't do? They won't go out there and follow that rat's path. What do they do instead for an unfamiliar scent? Rat comes back from foraging, smells like something you've never smelled before. You don't want to follow it to where that food was. What do you want to do? Well, he's already eaten it. That's why he smells the way he does. So So he's already eaten it.
So then watch them and see, like how he reacts.
Watch him and see what happens to him. If after a while nothing bad is happening to him, the guy feels okay, guess what? Follow the path out to wherever that food was. New food source, a food source I'm not even familiar with. Other rats are coming in constantly. Come in, sniff, sniff. Ah, food. Let's go get food over there where that rat came from. Ooh, unfamiliar food. Unfamiliar scent. Watch and see what happens to that dude. So they're not alone in this process. They're actually using information that other rats are bringing to this colony, which is kind of the information center. And then they make decisions about what they can go out and forage for or not. So in the book, there's an oversimplification that rats are just out there as these lone actors and they occasionally eat things that are bad for them and die. It's more complicated than that, but that's true of almost everything in life. But we have way more food culture than a rat has food culture. Rat has food culture in this information center idea. We have food culture in that we can pass down recipes from generation to generation, which rats don't have the ability to do that. Not only that, we have our evolutionary history working for us. And this is something that we share with rats. Why do poisons taste bitter? Is there something inherent about poisons that makes them taste bitter? Why do you have taste in the first place? Have you ever thought about taste? On your tongue are taste buds. He talks about taste buds just momentarily in this chapter. On your tongue are taste buds, and they're responsible for sensing different types of taste. They're distributed differently on the tongue. Sweet sensors up front, bitter sensors are in the back. It actually doesn't make a damn bit of sense from the standpoint of evolution now that I think about it, but we'll talk about that later maybe. But what makes bitter? For that matter, what makes pain? All of you have experienced pain, right? Stub your toe, cut your finger. It hurts. When it hurts, what do? Stop whatever you're doing, but what do you do after that to get rid of the pain? Okay, so give me some ideas. You might put ice on it, sure. What else might you do? You might take medication. You might take a Tylenol. If it's really severe pain, you might take something like an opioid, which you should probably not. And if you do take them, you shouldn't take them for very long. You take something to kill the pain. When you take, I was in a bicycle accident in 2013. Pretty bad. Broke my collarbone, damaged my hip. It took me 6 months before I could even get back on the bike. I was in a ton of pain. It happened in Wichita Falls, Texas. I had to ride in a car all the way back to Kansas City, totally broken in my friend's car from this bike event in Wichita Falls. And that was on a Saturday. By Sunday night, I was in like so much pain that I couldn't sleep. I couldn't function. I went to the hospital because they had given me some lame-ass hydrocodone. And I'm like, it's just not taking the edge off. So they gave me something stronger. I went home. I took it. And after a couple of hours, the pain wasn't gone, but it was severely lessened. But my collarbone was still broken. My hip was still messed up and would remain so for the next 6 months. What did the medicine do to me that made me feel more comfortable? Damage is still there. It tricked your brain. You still have nerves in your collarbone or wherever that are sending pain signals. We still have a couple of minutes.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Paul.
That's all right. 10 o'clock, right? 10:05 we get out here? All right, cool. My collarbone was still broken. My hip was still messed up. What the drug did is it interrupted the pain, the neurons that are sending pain messages to my brain. It interfered with my brain's ability to detect those nerve impulses. It just interrupted things. Taking the painkiller didn't fix my collarbone. It removed the ability of my brain to perceive that my collarbone was broken. When you taste something, the chemicals in the food that you're tasting interact with your taste buds. Your taste buds send a signal to your brain that it's tasted something, and your brain interprets that as sweet or bitter or savory. But your brain has been trained to interpret those signals over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. So when you taste something bitter, that's the accumulation of your predecessor's evolutionary experience of sticking things in their mouths and either having positive outcomes or having negative outcomes. If you gave something that is bitter to you to some other species, they might not have any problem eating it because it doesn't affect them in the same way. So they've never evolved that taste sensation to be associated with that particular type of food. Our brains are what tells us what things taste like, not our tongues. It's how our brain interprets the neural impulses coming from our tongue that tells us whether something is sweet or bitter. When something's bitter, what do you want to do with it? You want to spit it out. Because over hundreds of thousands of years, people who spit out things that were bitter tended to survive, leave those genes on to the next generation, such that you spit out things that are bitter. What happens to you when you taste something sweet? You want more of it. Oh, that Snicker bar? I'll have a second. Or a third. I'll wash it down with a soda. You have an evolutionary predilection towards sweet things. When we get to hunter-gatherers, we'll talk in more detail why that might be the case. But imagine that you're a hunter-gatherer, you're eating insects and grains and plant material, and you come across a colony of honeypot ants. Everybody look up what a honeypot ant is like on your devices. Honeypot ant. What does it look like? It's like a little body with a big old abdomen full of sugar. When you see Aboriginal people in Africa who still are hunter-gatherers, and there are still a few groups of African hunter-gatherer groups, some of the Australian Aborigines also are still hunter-gatherers. When they run across a colony of honeypot ants, they stop, they dig into that colony, they grab each ant, they put it in their mouth, the abdomen in their mouth, they pluck off the abdomen, and they eat it, throw the body away. And they will do that, and they will decimate an entire colony of honeypot ants. And it's because they live under conditions, because they're hunter-gatherers, of food limitation. And so when they come into contact with a high-energy food source like a honeypot ant, they eat the hell out of it. We evolved as hunter-gatherers 200,000 years ago. Every human on the planet, until about 10,000 years ago, was hunter-gatherer. Think about that. 10,000 years ago, every human on the planet did not have agriculture. Hunter-gatherers just barely get enough food to survive. That's kind of one of the things about being a hunter-gatherer. So when you come into a high-density food like sugar, whether it's honeypot ants in Africa and Australia, or whether it's honey hives in the temperate areas of the world, your body craves that, and you eat a lot of it, and you eat it and eat it and eat it because you may not come across that for another 3 or 4 weeks. So when you come across it, you eat the hell out of it. And that works fine for a hunter-gatherer. But that is hardwired in you such that when you find yourself in the candy aisle at the Hy-Vee, you're now in a really bad place because you have this evolutionary history that says, eat the sugar in an aisle full of sugar. So we also have not only our culture, but we also have our biology that influences what we eat and how much we eat of it. See you guys on Wednesday.
I won't be
Yes, sir.
here Wednesday and Friday.
For football, going to Colorado? I've been videotaping. I haven't posted yet, but I'll be posting them.
Okay.
And so you can log on and see what we did.
Perfect.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Same. Yep. All right. Not a problem. Yes.
So, this year was the main reason I chose this class because
Uh-huh.
I really want to get. I mean, I got to research about it.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
So I'm really interested in
Oh well, good.
it.
Well, cool.
I told you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I just closed the door.